When a culture is in its civilization stage, that is, its stage of technics, economic thinking, democracy, and rationalism, the main forms of power that act as the mechanism of ascent on the socio-political hierarchy are money and bureaucracy. In other words, in today's world, a person climbs the ladder of success and power by having officially stamped credentials and a large bank account. Your charisma, spiritual excellence, personality, heroic capabilities, selfless action, and other virtuous qualities have little, if anything, to do with gaining power and wealth. It is extremely easy for people to gain power in a bureaucratic, money-oriented society. The so-called playing field has been leveled. All you need to do is collect money and pass some academic tests. Anyone at all can do this. There is no excellence required, especially with today's extraordinarily lax academic standards brought on by the scientific materialistic paradigm and democratic beliefs in equality and sameness, resulting in the urge toward mediocrity. This means that the job market for securing elite positions is extremely competitive because there are many millions of people engaged in this rat race. Now, an elite position is an administrative or technical position that is not part of the productive class. Essentially, any corporate or government office job, i.e. a job that offers as much wealth and power as possible while demanding as little real work as possible. These jobs include, but are not limited to, democratically elected politicians and their assistants, business managers, financiers, accountants, pencil pushers and desk jockeys of all kinds, number crunchers and information sifters of all kinds, software engineers, drafting engineers, administrators, and so on. Essentially all the jobs that require a college degree. Everyone is told as they grow up, go to college, compete for these elite jobs, and secure your freedom and happiness thereby. And of course, all these people deny that they are part of the elite or striving to be part of the elite. They are endlessly insulted when you tell them that they are in the elite by having graduated from college. They believe that the elite are the super rich power mongers, while they are simply striving to be merely moderately rich power mongers. They believe that they are the so-called educated class, whom I prefer to call brainwashed elite aspirants. College students and graduates generally love to claim that they are anti-elite. That's the trendy thing to do. Because, of course, they need to virtue signal that they believe in democratic values, equality, mediocrity, and sameness. A good person in today's world is supposed to be anti-elite. They learned how the world really works while attending college. Their Marxist and capitalist professors told them all about it. They know that difference is a sin, that equality and democracy are virtues. They will never admit to wanting to be different, to be higher on a social hierarchy that they say should not even exist. Yet, they are climbing it simply as a matter of course, as a given purpose in life, and because they believe that they are the most qualified to be making political and cultural decisions, dictating the future of our culture, because they believe they have been enlightened by the university system. What they're really doing is filling an empty role that was left open by the destruction of spirituality. At one time, there were excellent people who were truly enlightened by rigorous spiritual training, usually within an initiatic order or a so-called mystery school. And these individuals really were qualified to rule because they underwent a fundamental transformation of consciousness and understood reality and humanity far better than anyone else. Such people possess true wisdom and do not care one iota about being accepted by the masses or being politically correct according to some flavor of the week ideology. They acted in accordance with divine order and instinct, not rationalistic human ignorance. But the rigorous spiritual training of initiatic orders has been replaced on the one side by Christianity and on the other by materialistic education. It was replaced by bureaucratic training and academic hoop jumping. And those who jump through these academic hoops believe themselves to be the great enlightened initiates of the modern world, who deserve to be the ruling elite by virtue of possessing a holy diploma from the Church of accredited universities. But again, they will never admit to this for fear of appearing hypocritical. Now, being hypocritical is no problem for them. They simply don't want to appear hypocritical. So they attempt to climb and climb and climb the so-called ladder of success through economic, bureaucratic, and academic maneuvering. This now defines the entire course of their lives forever, dictated by the distorted culture of materialism, economics, democracy, and rationalism that we are unfortunate enough to be suffering within because somebody aborted the 20th century resurgence of authority, which would have prevented this debacle, this ontological travesty of existence. If you want to know more about that, watch my videos, High Cultures Are Organisms and True Hierarchy and How to Create It for more. If you've seen those videos, you'll be familiar with all that I've said so far, but for this video I'd like to break down the elite aspirant problem further in a historical and philosophical way so that it can be recognized more easily in your own life and in society at large. And in doing so, I hope that you may be able to read between the lines of history and society and begin to develop your own solutions to this problem. To get really into the details about the so-called elite aspirant problem or the overproduction of elites, you can do no better than Peter Turchin's End Times. He's a historical dynamicist, a theoretical historian. I'll make a video about theoretical history at one time in the future. But for now, the elite aspirant problem, in short, is simple. It arises when there are too many elite aspirants and not enough elite jobs. This is called elite overproduction. This means that many people who hoped and dreamed of becoming one of the elite, people who were promised a light at the end of the tunnel, become frustrated by failure to secure an elite position. They dotted every I, they crossed every T, they jumped through every hoop, they did everything they were told to do, and yet they failed. These frustrated elite aspirants do not gain the social status, political power, or wealth that they were promised, and feel a strong sense of unfairness and injustice. Such people are ripe for deception and can easily become the tools of culture distorters and culture aliens, such as charlatan politicians, social democrats, communist revolutionaries, delusional libertarians, intelligence agencies, and sometimes terrorist organizations. They want a quick and easy solution for the unwise life choices they were tricked into making by overwhelming social pressures, economic extortions, and criminal conspiracies that lie before us like a minefield that was placed long before we were even born. They desire money and power, and they want it now. And they will be easily seduced by any ideology or political movement that promises it to them. This is why true revolutions, in the positive creative sense, come from above. If they come from below, from the masses, they come from the dark telluric powers of greed, jealousy, hatred, impotence, frustration, and a will to violence, negation, destruction, and trickery. Only revolutions imbued with the higher spiritual power of cosmic order, brought into this world by the spiritually excellent aristocratic elite, can bring any lasting establishment of justice and creativity in this world. Justice that dominates the lower powers of the earth, the chaotic, telluric, chthonic darkness that seduces people to love money, luxury, and ease, and to seek hate-filled vengeance against those of whom they are jealous. The suicidal violence of democratic, communistic revolutions, such as those of the French in 1789 and the Bolsheviks in 1917, is offered to frustrated elite aspirants through deception, propaganda, and coercion. This style of revolution is nothing more than trickery foisted upon us by corrupted Freemasonic social engineers and our historical enemies who eternally yearn for vengeance against us and sadistically revel in watching us destroy ourselves. They whisper into the ear of frustrated elite aspirants, "Oh, poor baby, you didn't get the job that you deserve. Well, how about a full communist revolution? That'll put the power of money into your hands. Or maybe we should steal all the money from the middle class and redistribute it. Or just keep it for yourself. Would that make you feel better?" They're all mostly white privileged people anyway. They deserve suffering and death, don't they? They've been benefiting from their own civilization for far too long, haven't they? Anyway, I'm sorry you didn't get hired for that cushy office job. Such frustrated elite aspirants who have wrought catastrophe and death are scattered throughout the historical record in all high cultures. So my first example is from late medieval France. In the 13th century, there was a population boom that began 2 centuries earlier. The population tripled in less than 5 generations due to the importance and greatness of the French kingdom. It attracted a great deal of immigration. This overwhelmed the capacity of the economy. There were not enough jobs, not enough land to give to peasants, and not enough food for everyone. Most people lived in starvation and poverty during this time, but the wealthy nobles were in a better position to survive this economic downturn. The noble class, at this time in history, determined more by money and only partially by blood, similarly to today, also increased in size very quickly, sometimes faster than the productive class, in that the landowners and business owners from the peasantry became rich nobles due to high rent prices, high food prices, and low wages that they greatly benefited from. They are able to fill their coffers with money. This created a wealth pump from the productive class to the wealthy class. Basically, the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. As their income increased, noble families became more savvy in securing their wealth in noble positions, dividing their extra land and business assets and money amongst all of their sons instead of just giving it all to the oldest. Each of their children was now able to become a middle rank or low rank noble elite instead of falling back into the peasantry like they normally would do. And the numbers of the elite having sufficient income to remain in the nobility skyrocketed. The social pyramid became very, very top-heavy. But now, there was less and less cheap, plentiful labor, seeing that many peasants were becoming elite. These elites could not maintain their income as wages had to competitively increase as the workforce shrank, so they sought employment from the state, demanding higher taxes from the productive class that they could live off of. Instead of being businessmen or farmers or whatever that the elite would normally be, now they just wanted to be government lackeys that just got paid for doing administrative work. And so the increase in taxes on the productive class was the only way to secure noble positions. But of course, there are not that many government jobs available in any given society, and increased taxes cause inflation, and the royal treasury was already being depleted by these elite demanding more income from the state. The higher taxes also caused landlords to begin stealing from their tenants and generally oppressing them for more wealth extraction, because the landlords couldn't pay the taxes either, and they wanted to maintain as much wealth as possible, so they were just extracting it even harder from the peasantry. All of these economic programs exacerbated the problems, and the elites then began fighting and competing amongst themselves. This is how your society begins to disintegrate. In 1328, the king died without leaving a male heir, and so there were three claimants for the throne, one from England, and they warred against each other, which caused a lot of instability and opened the doors for peasant rebellions to simultaneously occur. There was a complete state collapse of the French kingdom by 1360. Then the following generation of elites, the previous generation dying in war or of old age, the following generation, not having lived through this terrible time, repeated the mistakes of their parents and continued extracting wealth from the peasants and fighting amongst themselves. By 1415, there was another total state collapse. They were conquered this time by the British, and peasant rebellions, famines, and epidemics plagued the kingdom. By 1453, the French then reconquered their kingdom, and the problem seemed to be solved by this terrible century of war, poverty, starvation, and disease, which reduced the population by about 60%, which included a reduction of the nobles by a factor of 4, who died in battle or in intra-noble massacres. The social pyramid was no longer top-heavy. There was finally enough land, cheap rent, and higher wages for the peasantry to live higher quality lives. The memory of the British occupation, then, gave the nobles a united national cause and feeling against a shared enemy, and they implemented economic reforms that were favorable for everyone in the kingdom for a few generations to come, many generations actually. So we can see the solution of elite overproduction and popular suffering in this case was massive waves of death and war with an outsider. Not very pleasant or sustainable solutions, in my opinion. Also not real solutions. These were not real transformations of their consciousness. These did not root out the spiritual causes of these problems. It was simply a depopulation that led for more easy wealth distribution. These solutions were forced upon the French people by nature and social law. Nature and social law only overtake cultures who lack self-awareness, who have no sense of history, who have no will to acknowledge their problems, and are blinded by greed. If you cannot muster the spiritual excellence to solve these problems politically and spiritually, nature will provide solutions in the form of depopulation, destructive war with outsiders, and destructive intracultural massacres. In other words, revolution from below. As I said earlier, the lower forces of the earth are destructive and chaotic. They are the forces of negation. They are the chthonic and telluric forces that do not give a damn about human beings or their welfare. These forces are not creative or orderly or positive in any way. If a culture fails to rally their inner forces of creativity, order, and positive political action, they will automatically suffer the forces of negation and destruction in the natural course of time. My next historical example is from the Qing Dynasty era of China, which was 1644 to 1912. That society was ruled by bureaucratic scholar administrators similar to the modern West. Elite aspirants had to pass some exams dealing with Confucian political science. The more exams you passed, the higher up the ranks you moved. Again, very similar to our university degree system, which goes from a high school diploma to a 2-year college degree, to a bachelor's degree, to a master's degree, and then finally to a doctorate, and includes any number of certifications in between these ranks. In the Qing Dynasty, this had a positive effect. This helped with literacy among the elite and provided a shared sense of culture and morality with the Confucian classics. Unfortunately, our modern Western education system does not have this internal cultural benefit, as our system is controlled by cultural aliens and parasites. But even a relatively good functional system like in the Qing Dynasty, it is still vulnerable to population growth. The administrative industry simply does not grow with the population, or rather it only grows but very, very small, not commensurately. More and more people attended these schools and took these exams, so more and more people felt entitled to elite jobs. One ineffectual solution was to make the higher rank exams artificially more difficult to score well so that fewer people would succeed. Our modern situation is just as bad in terms of population growth, and even worse in terms of cultural distortion and disunion, which is caused by an education system infected by foreign or outmoded and outdated destructive ideologies from the 19th century. So by 1850, there was an enormous population of frustrated elite aspirants with no hope of getting the job they wanted, and an entire population of impoverished, starving people resulting from essentially the same conditions as in our French example. Enter Hong Zuiquan, a frustrated elite aspirant. He was the third son from a rich family who went to the best schools and had the best tutors money could buy. He achieved what would today be considered a master's degree, but failed to achieve the imperial or doctorate degree. This led to a period of depression and illness for him. During this time, his mind was polluted by culture parasites and culture distorters from the West, who had entered China at this time in the form of Christian missionaries and businessmen. In this period, Westerners were to China what the Jewish are to the West. He was taken in by the leveling egalitarianism and anti-hierarchical values of Christianity and democracy. He created a new religious cult called the Society of God Worshippers, based on these democratic Christian values, which was very attractive to the poor, suffering masses. It had a very seductive, easy way out ideology. The Chinese authorities attempted to suppress his movement, and this suppression then triggered the Taiping Rebellion, which some historians consider to be the bloodiest revolution in all of recorded history. Other rebellions of a similar nature, led by frustrated elite aspirants with similar stories to Hong's, erupted all over China at this time. Not to mention, similar revolutions were occurring in Europe at exactly this time. However, in 1864, Hong died, and these rebellions were suppressed successfully by the military leaders Zhang Guofan. And the Qing dynasty survived this conflagration until, of course, the World Revolution known as World War I broke out, and liberalism began to galvanize its place as the New World Order. Needless to say, other examples, Vladimir Ulyanov, aka Vladimir Lenin, and Lev Bronstein, aka Leon Trotsky, were also wealthy, frustrated elite aspirants and members of the cultural alien diaspora in Russia. They acted as culture distorters, taking advantage of the same conditions that led to popular immiseration, poverty, and suffering caused by rapid industrialization, overpopulation, and overproduction of elites. But in this case, the ruling elite actually had decent historical sense and self-awareness, including the Tsar's prime minister and minister of the interior, Pyotr Stolypin. He attempted to reform the economy to benefit everyone, slowly turning serfs into land-owning peasants, and he also suppressed communist revolutionaries and agitators. However, his life and program were cut short by a Jewish assassin, and his policies were cancelled after the Tsar abdicated the throne, and of course he and his entire family were then executed by more Jewish assassins. Stolypin was performing his duties properly by exercising authority and making sure the economy functioned for everyone, benefiting all while maintaining the hierarchical structure of his culture. But of course, communist revolutionaries don't want to solve problems with creativity, hierarchy, or nobility, noble action. They want to exacerbate problems, to persuade people to engage in orgies of blood and destruction, which allows them to become the masters of money and the new political elite while exacting vengeance upon their historical enemies. That's the real story behind the Bolshevik Revolution, if you want my opinion. What Stolypin attempted was called compression. According to Peter Turchin, I think he coined this term compression. When there is popular suffering and elite overproduction, generally history offers two solutions. That's revolution, death and destruction, or compression. Basically, these options can be seen as revolution from below or revolution from above. Compression is revolution from above. The elite see the problem. They feel a sense of responsibility and cultural unity, and they decide to solve the problem by mobilizing resources and giving up their hoarded wealth and reconfiguring the economy to benefit everyone. This actually occurred in the United States just after World War II, when the number of millionaires in the country dropped significantly from around 50 to around 15, when they all decided to reinvest into the nation. They gave up all their money. Real wages skyrocketed, inflation decreased, property became affordable, and the middle class became a solid reality taken for granted. This occurred because the wealthy elite felt a sense of responsibility and cultural cohesion and wanted to avoid a terrible revolution and disintegration of their society. Now, it's a tragic problem with our historical propaganda apparatus and our schooling system that our historians fail to acknowledge the fact that the United States was just one bad day away from a terrible bloody revolution in the late 1940s. The Great Depression had recently destroyed countless lives and stole wealth from nearly everyone and gave it to the culture distorters, and the nation had just fought a war that no one wanted to be part of. They were tricked into killing their European brothers and sisters for absolutely no reason but to pretend that they were protecting democracy and the cultural alien that we were supposed to have greater compassion for than for our own people. People were quite bitter about this. They were on the brink of an uprising, and to avoid this revolution, the policy of compression was implemented. However, it lasted only about one generation before our problems began to return, because they were not solved at a fundamental spiritual level. They merely put economic band-aids on this spiritual gunshot wound. And I think it was just to pacify the population for a while, to buy themselves some time, so to speak. The time they bought is nearly up. The same age-old choices lie before us. Ignore the problem and allow bloody revolutions and natural disasters to sweep across the land, or replace the economic elite with a spiritual elite. We need to dig deep within ourselves and initiate ourselves spiritually through self-awareness and self-control training. We must fundamentally transform our consciousness and stop loving money. We must destroy the power of money and the enticing hold it has over our souls. This will make us immune to communist propaganda and capitalist and libertarian greed-based solutions rooted in degenerate economic thinking from the 19th century. This will also render us impervious to the poisonous and self-destructive ideas offered to us by the culture distorters. We must suppress the entirely negative influence of the culture distorters and discover within ourselves solutions to these problems. Solutions which are rooted in cosmic hierarchy and create a complete positive system of values to replace the outdated, outmoded, negative, and destructive values of the 18th and 19th centuries, ideologies which have outlived their welcome and are kept artificially alive by the culture distorters. We must create these new values and rediscover the old ones that are distinctly and instinctively ours, from our original Hyperborean solar tradition, from our own innermost subjective reality. And through the application of our own spiritually anointed authority, we will sweep away the degeneracy and corruption that has taken a hold of our culture. To hell with elite overproduction and the economic and political and bureaucratic solutions that people try to come up with. We must render bureaucracy and money irrelevant by becoming spiritually excellent, spiritually superior to all those who consider themselves today's elite. If they want money, you must want honor. If they seek credentials, you must develop charisma. If they want arbitrary obedience, you must be able to inspire action and loyalty. Undermine them through your spiritual excellence. Be better than them in every way.